We begin today the Gemara on Daf Samach Tes, 6 lines down from the top of the Yomid. Omar Rab Yitzchak. So this Gemara is continuing from what it said before regarding oif, a bird that was brought as a carbon. So there are certain psulim that when that happens, it still could be b'di'evet. If it was brought on the Mizbeach, you don't have to take it down. And therefore, if it was placed into the person's throat, which is the place where you would become tameh from an avela of a bird, this will not be metame. The melika of this bird will be effective, at least for this, that it won't cause any tumah. However, then there's other kinds of psulim that the melika of the bird is totally puzzle, and even b'di'evet, if it's brought in the mizbeach, you have to remove it, and therefore it will actually be metame in the regular halacha of an avela of a bird, which is when you place it into your throat. So now there's one of the cases that the Gemara discussed before, which was a machlokes regarding the psul of a zar, a non-kayin that did the malika or did the aveda of this bird. What happens then? Does it cause it to become completely puzzle, and therefore it will be an avela or not? So here the Gemara brings what Rav Yitzchak said about this. Amar Rav Yitzchak, Shamaiti, I heard shtayim. 2 points. Achas kemitze zar. 1 point I heard regarding the kemitze of a zar. So a zar that's doing the kemitze, which is the removal of with the fistful from the carbon mincha. Va'achas malika zar. And I heard one halacha regarding the malika of a non-kind of a zar. Now achas, regarding one of them I heard tated, that this is puzzle, because it's done by a zar, and even if it was brought onto the mizbeach, you have to remove it. And va'achas loitated. And regarding one of them I heard that once it was brought on the mizbeach, it could stay there. You don't have to take it down. Now, or the Shittim Gebetas adds, and I don't know which one is which. What the halacha here is. So Chizkiah says about this, Mistavre, it's logical to say, Kemitze Teirei, that if the Kemitze was done by a zar, then that is completely puzzle. Even if it's brought in the Mizbeach, take it off. Melike Loit Teiret. On the other hand, though Melike that's done by a zar, once it's on the Mizbeach, you don't have to remove it. So the Gemara explains what's the reason for this difference. And the Gemara asks, "My shna malike." What's the difference? That by malike the halacha is the yeshna b'bama. Malike could be done even by a zar in a bam. In a bama, a place that was a mizbeach outside the Beis Hamikdash before the Beis Hamikdash was built, and there was a heter to make a bama. There, it wasn't necessary to have a kain to do the aveda. It can be done by anybody. So if so, what's the difference? We find regarding Malike that it can be done by a zar in a bama. Now, if I see that there is such a kind of concept that a zar's aveda will qualify, so therefore even in the Beis Hamikdash where a zar is not allowed to do the aveda, but the psul is not so strong, since there is this concept of a zar doing an aveda, so therefore there's a svara to say that even in the Beis Hamikdash when the zar did aveda, b'di'evet though, it does not have to be taken off the mizbeach. So that's true regarding the balike. If so, kemitza nami, say the same thing regarding kemitza for the carbon mincha. Yeshna b'bama, that this is an aveda of a zar. Same thing, a zar, and that's something that qualifies by a bama. So even in the Beis Hamikdash, it shouldn't be such a big psul, and if it's already on the mizbeach, you shouldn't have to remove it. Now, if you'll argue and say that the whole thing is not necessarily true. Yeah, it is true, taka, that in a bama you don't need a kayin. A zar could do the aveda there. But regarding these two details that we're talking about, not necessarily, because if you'll argue and say, Ein mincha b'bama. In the bama, there was a heter, and this is learned from a pasuk in the end of the Masechta, that they were allowed to bring a carbon on this bama, but no mincha. The mincha carbon was not brought on a bama. And also, Ein oifis nami b'bama. So if that's the case, though, then birds as a carbon were not brought on a bama either. It's only Zevochim. And like the lashon of the pasuk that it says there, a zevach of a behemoth is what's brought on a bama. So you can't learn anything out from the bama. Rav Sheshes said, now this is actually a machlokes towards the imamish at the end of the Masechta, that l'divrei yesh mincha b'bama, the opinion that says that there was a carbon mincha brought in the bama, so yesh oifis b'bama. So they brought birds as a carbon on the bama as well. So there's no reason to make a distinction between them. And l'divrei ein mincha, ein oifis, the one that says that there was no carbon mincha in the bama, so there was no birds brought on a bama either. So our question, my time, Zevochim, as I mentioned, because the lashon of the pasuk regarding a bama, it uses the term Zevochim, which is slaughtering an animal, and v'loy minchas, not a mincha, and Zevochim v'loy oifis, and not birds. So the question is, why is Chizkiah saying that it's logical to say that the kemitza that's done by a zar, that's a psul that has to be taken off of the mizbeach, but malike is not such a big psul? What's the reason for this difference? So Ella says the Gemara, Eimeh, you can say as follows, that the Kemitze, you can't learn out from the Bama. Really, we're following here the opinion that there was a mincha on a Bama, and there was a oif that was brought on a Bama, but it's not the same thing though, because Ein Kiddush B'Klishares B'Mincha B'Bama, because regarding the Karban Mincha, it wasn't done like it was in Beis HaMikdash with a Kli Shadas, with a holy vessel, the way the Avodah is done there. So therefore you can't learn out from the way it was done on a Bama through a Zar to compare to the Beis HaMikdash. In the Beis HaMikdash where it's necessary to have a Kli Shadas, and over here it was done by a Zar, so that passes it completely, and if it's on the Mizbeach, you have to take it off. By the Oif though, by the bird, the way it's done in the Beis HaMikdash could be done by the Bama by a Zar, and therefore that shows that the psul of a Zar regarding a Oif is not as strong, and therefore once it was brought on the Mizbeach, you do not have to take it off. But by the Beis HaMikdash also not.
Right.
So therefore, there's no by the oif. There's no difference between the oif in the Beis Hamikdash and the oif by the bama. But by the mincha, in the bama there was no klisharis used, but in the Beis Hamikdash there was a klisharis used. So therefore, we can't compare them. We can't learn out from there.
A klisharis for what?
For placing the mincha into a bowl where you do the kemitza from it, and you have to be by a carbon mincha in the Beis Hamikdash. You have to be makdish the mincha in a kli sharis in order for it to be the proper kedusha, but not by a bama. There's no kli shadas b'chlal by a bama. Said in the Mishnah, malak b'smoya loy balayla chulu. If you do melike and the psul was that it was done with the left hand or it was done at night, so these are examples that the Mishnah said that it's going to passel the bird, the carbon. However, it doesn't passel it completely. Once it's brought on the mizbech, you don't take it off, and therefore this does not cause tumah. Even though the Malika now became disqualified, but the Malika does work at least for this, that this bird will not cause any tumah. Yes, the Gemara brings more details here in the Braisa. Tan Rabbana, we learned in one Braisa, Yachol Tehei, Malika, Shehi Lifnim, Mitama, Begodim, Bebeis Abliya. I would think that Malika that's done inside the Beis HaMikdash, and this must be talking about a pasala Malika. I mean, a kosher Malika is we learn it's learned that already from a different place. It's pashut that when that's done properly, that you don't become tummy from it. But over here, if it's a pasala malika that's done inside the Beis Hamikdash, so I would think that since it now is a pasala malika, so you should become tummy, and the garments of the person becomes tummy, and that's if it's bebeis abliya, if the bird is in your throat. Talmud Loimar, the pasuk says nevela. We learn from this word nevela to say that this bird, that malika was done to it, even though it's a pasala malika, that it does not become an avela. So now the Gemara will clarify here, how are we learning out from this word in the pasuk nevela? This is the pasuk where it says the tumah. Chol nefesh, if you see over on the side, the pasuk says nefesh asher teichal nevela utreife and v'tamei adarev. So the Gemara is darshaning, it says there nevela, and this bird that you did malika for it, even though it's pasal, is not included in that nevela. What's the reason? Well, how do we know? So the Gemara asks, Hanami nevela, shouldn't I say that this is also a nevela because you didn't shech this bird, you did malika with a fingernail, and now it turns out it's pasul, so it should be considered like something that a bird that was killed without shchita, and the whole thing is pasul. So why is it also not a nevela? So Ella the Gemara explains right there in that pasuk it says nevela utreife. So we're learning Talmud Lema treife. We're really learning out from the word treife, and that is, as the Gemara will explain it, we're comparing the word nevela to the word treifa. Ma treifa shem materes is just like a treifa. What happens with a treifa? A treifa causes to be matter anything that's forbidden? Not at all. Adarabah. A treifa means that it's going to be also to eat it. Afkal, so too in this pasuk when it says that it becomes tomei, and that means, in other words, when it says nevela, that a nevela causes tomei, that's only shem materes is. That's only if it's a kind of nevela that there was no iser that became now permitted. And therefore, yotza malika shehilifnim, that excludes a bird that you did malika for it in the Beis Hamikdash, and even if the malika was pasal. But even a pasal malika is permitting a certain iser. What does it mean? That this bird, when it's still alive, you can't be makted on the mizbeach. But after you do the malika, even a pasal malika, b'diavad, if it was brought in the mizbeach, you don't take it off. So therefore, the malika was effective for this, at least for this, to be matter. That is, so the b'diavad, it's not taken off of the mizbeach, and therefore, Ein metame begadim bebeis abliya. It won't be metame the garments in beis abliya. And that's so we're learning this out from comparing from the treifa to the nevela. That was the drasha that Braisa said. Now, based on this, Hevi or Avi, I can also bring and learn out the following. And now here is other cases where when it was not done right, it actually will be metame the person. And that is Hamaylik, and the simon here is Kates, Chayfet simon. Hamaylik kachim bachotz, if you did malika for kachim outside the Beis HaMikdash, outside the Azara. Or Maylik chulim, and then you did malika for a chulin animal. It's not a carpet, just chulin, and you did this malika, be'emi b'fnim, be'emi b'chutz, whether inside the Azara, whether outside. So in all these cases, these three cases here, hoyol, ve'ei matira nesa iser, since the malika that was done is not matir iser at all. Because a bird that the malika was done outside Azara, you can't bring it on the mizbech at all. Even if you bring it on the mizbech, you have to take it off. It's totally possible. And by a cholin animal, you have to do shchita. You do malika, it's not matter anything. So that's like a treifa. And metamim begadim abeis abliya. And therefore the din of tumah that applies to a bird, when it goes into your throat, you become tumah, your garments become tumah, will apply here in this case. Now, Tanya Idach, there's another Braise that says about this and adds more cases. Yochel, I would think to say, hey, shchitas chulin lefnim. I would think that if you shechted a chulin, a bird of chulin, you shechted it inside the azara, or v'kotchim, or you shechted a kotchim, a bird, beimi b'fnim, bein inside and beimi b'chutz, or outside. I would think that mitama beis abliya, that this would make the person tamei the beis abliya. Why? Because if you're shechting a bird inside the azara, you can't eat from this bird. You're not supposed to shecht it inside the azara. It's chulin, and you shechted it inside. You're not supposed to eat from it. And similar regarding the kotchim, that you shecht it. It's supposed to do malika for it, not shecht it with a knife. And you shechted it whether inside the azara, whether outside. So I would think that now, since it wasn't done right, it should be mitama the person the beis abliya. So Talmud Laima, this Braisa brings the same pasuk and says nevela. We learn out from the word nevela that this is not included in nevela, and therefore it's not going to be mitama the person. Okay, so now here the Gemara again clarifies the drasha similar to what we said before. The Gemara asks, "Ha nami nevela? Aren't these cases also? Why shouldn't I include them also in nevela if the shechita was done in the wrong location, or in a case where the shechita wasn't supposed to be done? It's kachim, it's a bird, that's kachim, it's supposed to be done malika. So why wouldn't I say this is also part of nevela? Ella, the answer is like we said before. Talmud loymar treifa. In the same pasuk it says nevela utreifa. So I compare the nevela to the treifa, and here this Braisa compares them, and it gives actually a new rule, another rule, what we learn out from the treifa. Ma treifa, just like regarding the treifa, shove b'fnim kibachutz. The halacha with the treifa is the same, whether it's inside in the azara, whether it's outside. It doesn't make a difference. In both cases, a treifa is asr. A bird that's a treifa. A treifa is a bird that the idea of treifa is that it has a mortal defect, it can't live, and so on. So a treifa is the same halacha that it's asr, whether it's inside the azara, whether it's outside. So on that we say that this treifa becomes tomei. Afkol shovais b'fnim kibachutz. When do I say that there's going to be a din of tumah by a bird? That's only if it's done in such a way that the halacha of it is the same inside and outside. So now, therefore, yotza shchitas chulin b'fnim. That excludes when you shecht chulin that inside the azara. So inside the azara, it's not the right place, but outside, it's actually perfect. You shechted a bird regular. So it's not the same inside and outside. And also the kotchim, beimi b'fnim, beimi b'chutz. So now also the kotchim, the bird, that was shechted both inside and outside, it's also not the same. And that the Gemara will clarify here. Hoyel v'loy shavu b'fnim ki b'chutz. They're not the same inside and outside. Ein b'tamei b'gadim abeis abliya. It will not make the person tamei when he places the bird, when the bird is in his throat. So because it's not the same like a treifa. Again, the treifa has to be the same isser of treifa is inside the azara and outside. Okay, so now the Gemara clarifies because there's one detail here that's not understood. Now, bishloim chulin, I could understand regarding chulin that you shechted it inside the azara. So yeah, leishavu b'fnim kibachutz. It's not the same. Outside, it's a regular kosher shechita, and inside is the wrong place for it. So because it's not the same in inside, so I say that the din of tumah bebeis habliya does not apply. That's what I learn out from the comparison to the treifa. But when it comes to kachim that you shechted from a bird inside and outside, when you shecht a bird, and it's supposed to be done with malika, whether it's done inside, whether it's done outside, they both are puzzle. So maybe I should compare it to the treifa and say, just like the treifa is puzzle inside and outside, so here as well, this should be puzzle and this should make you tummy when it's bebeis abliya. So Rava answers, no, you still can't compare this bird when you shecht it outside to when you shecht it inside. Why? Because outside actually, the shechita of this bird does have some kind of effect. Im ha'iloloi, shechitas chutz l'chayvei koris. This bird, this kachim bird, that you shecht outside as a carbon, so what is it effective for? It's effective for this, that now you'll be chayiv koris for shechting kachim outside of dazara, shechitas chutz. So it does have a certain effect outside. But so on the other hand though, if you shechted inside, then that doesn't apply. The shechita inside is not mechayiv you koris, and the shechita that's done inside is possible. He's supposed to do malika for it. So therefore, so therefore, since it's not the same inside and outside, so therefore it will not be effective for it that to be metayired from nevela. And so it's because it's not the same inside and outside at least regarding this detail. Regarding the outside, it's chayiv koris when you shecht it. Okay, so now the Gemara explains, Ashkechon chutz. I see that when you shecht it outside, that it's over here, the shechita, what does it do? It has the koyach to be mechayiv koris. So that shechita has some kind of effect, has some kind of a koyach, and therefore also has a koyach regarding this, that it's not going to be on a vela. It's not the same as the treifa, which is the same inside and outside. So this is different. Over here, the shechita of a bird outside has some kind of effect. True for the negative, but it has some kind of effect. But pnim minolan. How do I know though if I shech this bird on the inside that it should also be effective somehow, that it should not become an avela? Why should it not become an avela? When you shecht this bird inside, that's not the way it's supposed to be done. It's supposed to be done with malika, and instead you shechted it. And over here, that shechita l'chayre has no effect at all. It doesn't do anything. You just passel the bird. Outside, at least you see that the shechita of this kachim bird had some effect, regarding the fact that it'll be chayiv koris. So I could say that it proves that it has an effect, so it has an effect also for this, that it will not be an avela. But the shechita of this bird inside, why should I say that it has an effect that it will not be an avela? So the answer is hoyel. Here we go back to the rule that we said before. Hoyel v'lo shavu b'fnim kibachutz. Because it's not the same inside and outside. Outside, if you shechted, it's chayiv koris. Inside, if you shechted, you're not. So it's not the same inside and outside. And therefore, if this shechita of this bird is done inside the azara, you're not. It's not going to be metama like a nevela, because it's not compared to the treifa. The treifa is aser, and it's the same inside and outside. Okay, so now the Gemara asks on this, and we have this rule. If so, ihachi malak kachim b'chutz. If you're going to do the malika of a bird outside the azare, so I should also say nami loy. It should not become an avela, and it should not be metamayu, because the leishavu b'fneim kebachutz. Because this is a case where it's different outside and inside. If we have this new rule here that we learn from the treifa, that if it's always aser, inside, outside, then it becomes an avela. But if it's something which is not aser, wherever it is, inside the azara and outside, then the din of nevela, the tum of nevela, does not apply. So then the case of malika. Malika, when you do it inside the azara, that's kosher. That's exactly how you do a bird, the aveda with the bird inside. When the malika is done outside, so then it's completely possible. And before we said, it becomes completely possible that if you take it, put it on the mizbeach, you have to remove it, and it is matam as an avela. So why are we saying that? Over here we have this rule that if something was done is not going to be possible inside and outside, then it's not going to be matama like an avela. Omar Rav Shimi Barashi. So Rav Shimi Barashi answers, no, over here you can't say this. It doesn't make sense to compare it. Because donin davar shaloi bechsheira medavar shaloi bechsheira. If we have something that inside and outside that wasn't done kosher, like what we were talking about today, we were talking about shechting a bird. There's shechting the bird inside the azara, and there's shechting the bird outside the azara. But in both places, the shechita is not the way it's supposed to be done, because you're supposed to do malika. not shchita. So over here, I can apply this rule that if the way it's done outside and the way it's done inside is not the same, so it's not compared to treifa, and therefore it will not be a nevela. But over here, though, we can't compare and learn out the malikia that's done outside the azara that's totally puzzle to the malika of a bird that's done inside the azara, where there it's totally kosher. The malika inside the azara, that's exactly how the bird has to be done. So now you're going to tell me that if the malika is done outside, I'm going to start making this calculation that here I have a bird that it's not the same inside and outside. The malika inside is completely kosher, so I can't learn out, I can't compare to that bachlal. And therefore a malika that's done outside is actually totally puzzle, and it does become an avela, it is metame. The Gemara asks in this answer, V'loi, do we not find that I compare to something which is totally kosher? But Vatanya, we learned in the Braisa, the Gemara quoted before, Minayin liyoitze. How do I know that a carbon that was brought in the azara, but then the meat was taken out, or the sacrificial parts that's supposed to go on the mizbeach, it was taken out of the azara, and you brought it back in, and then it was placed on the mizbeach. So how do I know regarding this Shem Allah lo yered? Once it was placed on the mizbeach, do not remove it. The answer is Shaharei Yaitse Kasha B'Bama, because by a bama, which is obviously outside the azara, and there you could bring the carbon on the bama even though it's outside. So therefore, a carbon that was brought inside the Beis Hamikdash or inside the azara, and you took it out and brought it back in, and it's on the mizbeach, you don't remove it anymore. So what do I see over here? You're learning out this halacha regarding the status of this meat that was taken out and then was placed on the mizbeach. From where? We're learning it out from a bama where it's lechatchila b'chlal kosher. By the bama, there's no issue in the first place of going out. There's no going out. The bama is lechatchila outside. So how are we comparing? How are we comparing to a case of a bama, which is lechatchila outside, to this case where you took a carbon and you took it out and you passed it? So the Gemara explains that we're not really learning it out just misvara from comparing to the bama. That wouldn't be a good source. You can't compare. Rather, Tana Azayz Teiris Ha'ila Riba Samachlei. Really, what the Tana is relying on is the lashon of the pasuk. When it says Zayz Teiris Ha'ila, this is the pasuk that's the source. Teiras Ha'ila, that once it's brought on the mizbeach, you don't remove it, even if it's possible. But there's also miyutim in this pasuk. It says Zayz. It says Ha'ila. Certain psulim you don't remove from the mizbeach. Certain psulim you do remove of the mizbeach. It's. I might explain this before in the Masechta here that there's miyutim, there's drashas in the pasuk. We're using the bama in order to explain how to darshan the pasuk. But just misvara to compare to the case of the bama, you can't learn out anything from the bama because over there it's a chatchila done kosher outside. It's primarily based on the lashon of this pasuk of Zayis Teiris Ha'ila. This was explained earlier in the Masechta. Saktei Gemishle Malak. If you do the malike on the bird and v'nimtzis treifa, and you find out that this bird is now a treifa, has a mortal defect, and so what happens now? Rav Meir says, it will not make the person tameh as a bird does, usually in the Beis Abliya, because the malika is proper. And the fact that it's a treifa does not take away from the power of this malika. That's Rav Meir. Okay, so now even though the Mefarshim here discussed before, the Gemara said the rule that if you have a psul that's from the beginning, it was always possible. After you did the malika and you opened it up, you discovered that it was a treifa from the beginning. This should be a situation where it's possible from the beginning and it should be completely disqualified and it should cause tumah. But no, nevertheless, this is an exception here. Rav Meir says that you did a malika even though it turned out to be a treifa and it's possible and you can't eat it. But nevertheless, it's not going to cause any tumah. Rabbi Yehuda says, metame, that because now it's a treifa and you can't eat it, so the malika that was done is worthless. You can't eat from it, and also it's going to be an avela, it's going to be metame. This machlokes here is in our Mishnah regarding a case of malika, but it's over here the Mefarish brings that it's the same machlokes regarding shechita as well. If you shech the bird and then you find out that it's a treifa, what happens? It becomes disqualified completely from eating. The same machlokes between Rav Meir and Rabbi Yehuda would apply. Would it also now cause tumah or not? That's I mentioned yesterday that for the until daf ayin ches, it's not Rashi. That's on the side of the Gemara. The Rashi is further down here. Rashi Ksavya. This is from the Mefarish. Okay, so now Rav Meir. Rav Meir here says that I'll prove to you my point. Kal v'chomer. There's the following Kal v'chomer. When it comes to the dead carcass of an animal, where the level of tumah there is much stronger, because you become tummy even if you just touch it or carry it, not only if it's placed into the base abliya in the throat. If you shech this animal and then you discover that it's a treifa, it still will not cause any tumah. This is something that the Gemara will bring. Everybody agrees to this. You learn it from a pasuk that the shechita of an animal, even after it's a treifa, does not cause tumah. If so, nivla sa'oif, the dead carcass of a bird that has a much lighter level of tumah. By touching, carrying it, you don't become tumah. It's only if it's placed in the base of liya. Ain't it in? So definitely you should say that if you shecht it, even if it's a treifa, it should be metayiret. At least it should be effective, this shchita, that it should not be metame. So this is a kavachaymer learning from a behema regarding what? Regarding shchita. From the shchita of a behema when it's discovered to be a treifa to the shchita of a bird when you see it's a treifa. Now Rav Meir goes a step further and he says, if so, af milikasai, now I could compare the shchita to the melike that's so too by a bird. When you do the melike by a carbon, she machsharasai ba'achila. So usually the melike is what makes it fit to eat by a carbon. So tita treifasai midei tumasai. Just like, or Mamatzino, maybe I skipped one line here. Sorry. Mamatzino, he's comparing now. Mamatzino b'shchitasa shi machshirasa la'achila umetaheres treifa metumasai. Just like the shchita that is machshir to eat from it. And when you find it to be a treifa, it's not going to be an avela to cause tumah. So af milikasai shi machshirasa b'achila tita treifasai metumasai. When you do the malika, even though you have found it to be a treifa, you can't eat it, but the malika will be effective, that it will not cause any tumas nevela. Okay, so as you see here, Rav Meir is making a kavachaymer and then sort of stretching this kavachaymer another step. If you're making a kavachaymer from behema you don't do malika. A behema is done only with shchita. But then he's taking it to the next step and saying that we could apply this kavachaymer by a bird that even for malika, when it's found to be a treifa, it won't cause any tumah. This point Rabbi Yossi disagrees with. Rabbi Yossi says, Daya kinivlas behemesh, that we learn out from the kavachaymer more than what your source is. If the source of your kavachaymer is by behema, so then Daya. That's all you can learn out from that source. And that is shchitas metarasa v'loy melikasa. That only the shchita will be metayer, but not malika. So Rabbi Yossi is a middle opinion. It's a third opinion here. Rabbi Yossi says, regarding shchita, both by a behema or a bird, if you discover it to be a treifa, it's not going to be an avela. But for malika, when you discover it to be a treifa, then it will become an avela. That you can't learn from the kavachaymer because you're going a step more than the source of the kavachaymer, and that we say daya. You can't learn out more than your source in the kavachaymer. Says the Gemara, and Rav Meir, fragt the Gemara, Rav Meir leidarish daya. Does Rav Meir not hold of this rule that when we learn from a kavachaymer, then we say daya, which means it's enough. You can't learn out more than what the source is. The Gemara brings the source of daya. This concept of daya we learn from a pasuk in the Chumash, the Tanya, we learned in the Braisa, midin kavachaymer. There's a din of kavachaymer. Where do I see the din of kavachaymer in the Torah? Keitzad, how does that work? The pasuk says by Miriam, when she spoke on Moshe Rabbeinu, and then she became a mitzayra. And then Moshe Rabbeinu says, "Vayem Hashem al Moshe." Hashem says to Moshe, "Vayem Hashem al Moshe v'avia yarek b'faneh v'gaymer." And that what the Eibishter is saying is that if her father would be upset with her, then what would happen? Tisag shivas halei tikalim shivas yamim. She would be embarrassed for 7 days. And therefore, kavachaymer l'shchina. How much more so if the Eibishter is upset at her? For sure, she should have to stay behind. Now, when you're making this kavachaymer, you would think to say that if it's the shchina, arba, at least should be double. If it's only her father that's upset at her, and then she would have to wait 7 days. So if it's the shchina that's upset at her, so then it should be more. It should be 14 days. So why don't we say that? Why does the Eibishter conclude that Miriam is going to have to wait only 7 days? The answer is Elo Dayoy Lebom and Adin Liz Kenidin. Whenever you learn out a point from a kavachaymer, you cannot learn out more than what the source has. So the Eibishter made this kavachaymer from a father that's upset, and that's 7 days. So even though we're talking about the shchina, which is much, you would think misvara could be much greater, but it doesn't matter. It always goes by the source, and therefore it's also 7 days. So the Gemara's question is, how is Rav Meir making this kavachaymer from a behema, which a behema is only talking about shchita, and he's applying it to a bird even more than the source, that even by malika, when you find it to be a treifa, it will not cause any tumah. So the Gemara explains that there's an additional pasuk here. Besides this kavachimer, and that is enough to learn out regarding the shechita of a bird, there's also another source that he learns out that tells us that it applies even by the malika of a bird as well. What's the pasuk? It says, this is the halacha of the behema and the oif. So this pasuk is in the end of the parsha there where it speaks about the tumas, the kosher birds, non-kosher, and so on, and it finishes off with this, which means we're comparing a bird to the behema. So now the Braisa explains, or the Gemara explains, regarding what? Regarding what are we comparing them? Regarding which halacha is the behema and the oif compared to each other, and v'oif lebehema, or the other way, the oif to the behema. It would seem that they're not the same, because behema is matame b'mago b'masa. By a behema, the tumah you get when you touch it or when you carry it. Oif ain't a matame b'mago b'masa, but not by a bird. You don't get tummy by touch or carry. Oif metame begodim abeis abliya. By a oif, if it's in the throat, so then it makes you tummy and the garment tummy. Behema ain't metame begodim abeis abliya. But by the bas of a behema, that's an avela, it doesn't work that way. If it's in the beis abliya and it's not touching you, you don't become tummy, and the garments don't become tummy. So we see regarding tumah that the halacha of a oif and halacha of behema are completely not the same. So regarding what is the pasuk saying that we're comparing them? Elo, the comparison is Rabbi Meir is saying regarding this halacha that we're talking about. Lo malacha to tell you, ma behema, just like by a behema, dovasha machshira la'achila, when you do a shechita, which is machshir to eat it, metayer trefasa mitumasa, even in a case where you can't eat it, because it's a treifa, but the shechita at least is effective for this, that it will not be an avela to cause tumah. Afoif, so too by the bird, dovasha machshira la'achila, if you do malika, which is something that's machshir to eat by a carbon of a bird, even if it's a treifa now, and you can't eat from it, but it at least should be effective that it should not cause any tumah. This is an additional source. And we're learning out regarding malika, because regarding shechita we already have a kavachaymer, as Rabbi Meir said in the Mishnah. So this is an additional source that we learn out regarding malika as well. Rabbi Yehuda, my time, what's Rabbi Yehuda's source? Rabbi Yehuda in the Mishnah says that you do malika or shechita on a bird and you discover it to be a treifa, it becomes like a total nevela and it's metamiyu. What is his source? Says the Gemara Karash Kach v'Kadash. He also has a pasuk that he darshans. It says in the pasuk there, nevela u treifa. So the Torah is comparing the two, nevela and treifa. It says in the pasuk, if you eat from a nevela and treifa, you become tummy. So we're comparing the nevela and the treifa. Rabbi Yehuda. So first Rabbi Yehuda points out treifa lama nemra. What is the pasuk here saying when it says that if you're eating from a treifa, then you become tummy? Why does it have to say this? In treifa chaya, if this is an animal which is a treifa, has a defect, and it's gonna die eventually, but now it's still alive. So if you're going to tell me that while the treifa, this animal, the treifa, is still alive, it has a status of being a live animal because it didn't die yet, so then hare nevela amura. The Torah says only a dead carcass causes truma that is. This treifa that's still alive, so if you touch it, if it doesn't cause truma at all. So what's the Torah here saying regarding treifa? If you're going to say that treifa is an animal that has a defect and therefore it's going to die, and even when it's alive, it's already in the status of a dead animal. So then, harei b'chlal nevela. So the reason why the treifa causes truma because it's no different than a nevela. Just like a nevela is a dead carcass that was not shechted properly. So the problem with the treifa is that it has a defect and it's going to die and it doesn't have a proper shechita. So the tumah of a treifa, the point that Gemara is saying is the tumah of a treifa is the same like the tumah of an nevela. What's an nevela? An animal that's a dead carcass, meaning that it was not shechted properly. So isn't a treifa the same thing? So why is the Torah saying separately treifa? So therefore Rabbi Yehuda says, you know what we learn from here? The point that Rabbi Yehuda is machadish. Lahavi treifa sheshachta shametama. That if an animal is a treifa, even if you did shecht it, the shechita is not going to be effective at all. Not only is the shechita not going to be effective for you to eat from it, because it's treifa, but it's not going to be effective at all, even to not remove the status of tumah that there is because it's a treifa. This is Rabbi Yehuda's source, that if you find it to be a treifa, it remains tummy. Okay, but now the Gemara asks on this, that l'chayre would seem that this pasuk here, when it says treifa, is actually coming to darshan something completely different. As we will see here, the Gemara is going to point out that maybe when it says here treifa, it's coming to tell you that this halacha of tumah that applies here only applies to kosher animals. not to non-kosher tomei animals. Over there, this halacha of tomei does not apply. And maybe that's what this pasuk is coming to teach, not the chiddush of Rabbi Yehuda, as the Gemara proves this now. So Amalei Rav Shezvi said, Ela Mayata, if so, there's a pasuk that says, and this is the pasuk when it speaks about animals. Till here we're speaking about a bird, but the pasuk that it says by an animal, v'chelev nevele, and v'chelev treifa, the fats of a nevela and the fats of a treifa, and the pasuk there goes on to say that you shouldn't eat from it, and it causes tumah. So over here again, the question is, why is it speaking about a treifa? Hasamnami, over there as well, name we could say the same question that we asked before. Im treifa chaya, if this treifa, while it's alive, is still a living animal, so hare nevela amura. So then it only causes tumah when it's dead. So that doesn't apply to a treifa. Im treifa eina chaya, if you say that a treifa animal, even when it's alive, it already has the status of a dead animal because it can't live. So harei b'chlal nevela. So then the treifa is just like a nevela. There's no reason for the Torah to spell it out separately. So Ella, what this pasuk is coming to say, lahavi treifa sheshachta, a treifa after it was shechted, shechelba tohir. So the fats of this animal will be tohir miklal though. But from this I could learn out the he mitama, that the meat of this animal will cause tumah. That's l'chayra how you're going to have to darshan here in this pasuk if you compare it to what Rabbi Yehuda said before. But the question is regarding an animal, this is not true. This is something that everybody agrees to. Here we brought before the machlekes between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, all regarding a bird. But regarding an animal, everybody agrees that a treifa animal that was shechted does not cause tumah. So you cannot darshan the pasuk here this way that he mitama, that the meat of an animal that was found to be a treifa will cause tumah. Because Va'amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, Va'amar Rav Masnita Tana was taught in the Braisa regarding a behema, that when it says in the pasuk v'chiyamas min behema, that if a behema dies, that it becomes an avela and then it causes tumah. Why does it say min? Min means miktzas behema mitama, miktzas behema ena mitama. There are some behemoths that are going to cause tumah when they die, and some are not going to cause tumah when they die. Animal, by animal here, everyone agrees that if it's a treifa that was shechted, it does not cause any tumah. So therefore, this pasuk the Gemara just quoted before, chalev, nevela, chalev, treifa, is also a pasuk that's speaking about an animal. You cannot dash in that pasuk, treifa, the word treifa, to come and teach me that the meat of this animal that was found to be a treifa will cause tumah. Everybody agrees that we learn from min behema that it does not cause any tumah. So Ella, how are you going to dash in this extra word of treifa here that it says by an animal? You dash in as follows. Treifa mi bayale lemute tmeya. Again, treifa mi bayale lemute tmeya. What this word treifa is doing here is it's coming to exclude an animal which is not a non-kosher animal. Lemute tmeya. The word tmeya here means an animal that's b'chlal, a non-kosher animal. And that is mishi yesh b'minay treifa. This whole halacha of tumah, that you become tamei b'maga or b'masa if you touch it or you carry it. The halacha of tumah that we're talking about over here is only regarding a kosher animal, that the halacha of treifa applies to it. Because a kosher animal, if it's shechted and it's not treifa, then it's good to eat. And then it could also become a treifa, and then it's not good to eat. Now, yotzes azu, and therefore that excludes a non-kosher animal, or the Gemara says tmeya, a complete non-kosher animal, she'ein b'mine treifa. The whole halacha of treifa does not apply in the first case because you can never eat from it. And therefore the parsha that it says here regarding the tumah excludes that. This is how you have to darshan the pasuk here regarding a behema. And this everybody agrees to. If so, now the Gemara asks on Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda before darshan the word treifa in the pasuk by a bird, by a oif. So hachanami here by the bird as well. We should say l'ma'ute oif tamei she'ein b'minay treifa. That we should darshan the word treifa that it says they're not like Rabbi Yehuda darshan. How did Rabbi Yehuda darshan it? That the pasuk is writing the word treifa to say that even after you shecht it, it will remain tamei. The shechita will not help for it because it's treifa. But the Gemara now is suggesting or asking, just like by behema I see, that the word treifa is coming for a different drasha. The word treifa is coming to be memayit, non-kosher animals, so too by the oif. Why can't I say that when it says the word treifa by the oif, it's coming to say that the halachas regarding the tumah of this oif applies to kosher birds, but not by non-kosher birds, so that the din of treifa does not apply to them. So the Gemara answer is no, you can't say that here by the bird, according to Rabbi Yehuda, it's coming to dash in this point to exclude non-kosher birds. Because oif tamei Rabbi Yehuda, Minavela nafkele. According to Rabbi Yehuda, this that the din of oif tome is not included in the halachas of tome. In this parsha, he learns it out from another pasuk where it speaks about this halacha of nevela by a bird. The Tanyas we learned in the Brayos. Rabbi Yehuda said, "Yachol tehei nivlas oif tome metame begadim ma'beis abliya." I would think that this halacha we're saying here that a kosher bird, when it's a nevela, that it's metamayu and it's metamayu garments when it's in your throat, I would think that applies even to non-kosher birds as well. Talmud Loima nevela utreifa. This is a new pasuk. This is a different pasuk where it says together nevela and treifa. Lo yoicha, you shouldn't eat from it. Misha isure mishum bal toichel nevela. Only a kosher bird that you can't eat it because it's a nevela, because it wasn't shechted properly. Yotzezeh, and therefore that excludes a non-kosher bird. Any suri mishum bal toichel nevela. It's not also because it's a dead carcass. Ela mishum bal toichel tome, because it's just a non-kosher bird. It's tome. That's from where we're learning it out from. So therefore, according to Rabbi Yehuda, this point we learned that already from this pasuk here, and therefore the pasuk that was quoted earlier in the Amud here, where Rabbi Yehuda it says nevela treif. It's two different psukim. There's another pasuk where it says again nevela treifa. That's coming to say that even after you shechted it and you found it to be a treifa, it will cause tumah by a kosher bird. The shechting it will not be effective at all. Okay, it's middle. The Gemara contains mamish middle of Inyan, but we'll stop over here.